Have you ever really thought about your chair? Probably not, right? It's just there. But for most of human history and for billions of people today, the default setting for life isn't a chair at all. It's the floor. So today, we're going to dive into the sophisticated and often totally unseen world of floor sitting and why it might just hold the key to a healthier way of life. So let's just start with a kind of provocative question. What if our obsession with chairs, with couches, with all this furniture has actually made us forget a more dynamic and, frankly, a more advanced way of living? What if the best piece of furniture isn't an object at all, but the very ground right underneath our feet? To really get a handle on this, we first have to rethink the chair itself. So let's go back in time to a really key moment when one of the world's great civilizations faced a choice: stay on the ground or rise up on four legs. Now, you might think living on the floor is kind of primitive, but that's not it at all. In fact, during China's incredibly powerful Han Dynasty, everybody, from farmers to the emperor himself, conducted their lives on mats. It was the proper, civilized way to live, and even to rule. So what changed? Well, it started with this little thing, the hu chuang, which translates to the barbarian bed. After the Han Dynasty collapsed, nomadic tribes from Central Asia brought this simple folding stool with them. At first, it was just a piece of foreign tech, for travel or military camps. But it planted the seed for a total revolution in posture. But look, this change didn't happen overnight. It was a slow burn that took over 1,000 years. During the Tang Dynasty, chairs were fashionable, sure, but not dominant. By the Song Dynasty, they were starting to take over. And by the Ming Dynasty, the floor had been almost completely abandoned in mainstream Chinese culture. But while China was literally getting up off the floor, its neighbors, Korea and Japan, did the exact opposite. They doubled down on floor living. And they didn't just stick with tradition. They innovated, turning the floor itself into this incredibly sophisticated piece of technology. And they took two completely different approaches to this. In Korea, you have the ondol system, which was all about active thermal control, basically a centrally heated floor. Then in Japan, you have the tatami mat, which was perfected for passive climate regulation. It literally breathes with the seasons. The engineering behind this is just genius. The Korean ondol system funneled hot smoke from a fireplace through stone flues under the floor, turning the entire room into a giant, cozy radiator. I mean, why would you ever want a chair that lifts you away from the source of all that warmth? Meanwhile, the Japanese tatami, made of woven rush, absorbs humidity in the summer and insulates in the winter. The floor was the climate control. Okay, so we've seen the architectural genius, but what about the biological impact? This is where it gets really personal. It's all about what we could call your body's ground game, your ability to get up and down from the floor with ease. And this brings us to a really critical question. We might think of sitting as such a trivial choice, but what if it's one of the most important daily decisions you make for your long-term health? What if it could actually predict how long you're going to live? Now, this isn't just some wild speculation. It's actually measured by something called the Sitting Rising Test, or SRT. It's a simple clinical tool that doctors use to assess your strength, your balance, and your flexibility, all of which are absolutely crucial markers of your functional fitness. The test itself sounds so simple, right? You start standing, you sit down on the floor, and then you stand back up. The catch? You have to do it all without using your hands or your knees or your arms for support. It's simple to describe, but for many of us who live in chairs all day, it is shockingly difficult to actually do. And the results of this test are just stunning. Research shows that for every single point you gain on the 10-point SRT scale, there's a 21% improvement in survival rates. Let that sink in. That is a staggering link between your ground game and your longevity. And the benefits don't stop there. For example, cultures that live on the floor have drastically lower rates of hip arthritis. We're talking up to 90% lower. And why is that? Well, because sitting on the floor naturally takes your hips through their full range of motion every single day. Chairs just lock them into one static position. This is what doctors call active rest. See, unlike a chair that lets all your muscles just go limp, sitting on the floor constantly engages your core and your back. It can improve your digestion, it boosts flexibility, and it promotes a more natural spinal alignment. You're basically getting a low-level workout just by sitting.
But sitting is never just about your body. It's also a social performance. The way you hold yourself sends a powerful message about status, about respect, and about power. So let's get into the politics of posture.
So in Japan, the ultimate formal posture is called seiza, and that literally translates to correct sitting. I mean, the name itself tells you everything, right? There's a right way and a wrong way to sit, and your posture is constantly being judged. But this correct posture, it has a pretty dark origin. Seiza was actually enforced by the Tokugawa shoguns as a tool of social control. Why? Because after you've been kneeling for a long time, your legs go numb, making it pretty much impossible to stand up quickly and launch an attack. It was a posture of forced submission, and these rules are incredibly specific. In a formal setting, everybody does seiza, but casually, men are allowed to sit cross-legged, or agura. But that posture is traditionally seen as improper for women, who are expected to use a sideways sit instead. Your posture is communicating your gender and your respect for the situation all at once.
So, where does all this leave us today? In our final section, let's look at the modern conflict between the chair and the floor, and the pretty surprising way that floor culture is actually making a comeback.
You know, for much of the 20th century, the story was simple. To be modern meant to own chairs. Across Asia, chairs became these powerful symbols of economic progress and of westernization. Rising up from the floor was seen as rising up in the world.
But here's the twist. Just as many people in the East were embracing chairs, a floor time movement started exploding in the West, especially on social media. Driven by all of the health and longevity benefits we just talked about, Westerners are now actively trying to ditch their chairs and get back on the ground.
And this all leaves us with one final big thought. We've essentially outsourced our body's work to our furniture. We've traded that active rest for passive support. So if our bodies really were designed for a dynamic life on the ground, what critical parts of our health, our mobility, and even our connection to our own environment have we lost by living on chairs?